A gruesome story leads off our newscast.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a north side apartment, and now they wonder if they've uncovered some kind of death factory. Police hired a private contractor to haul a refrigerator and a tank of acid out of the apartment in the 900 block of North 25th Street. Because of the acid, some neighbors were evacuated briefly. Police found parts of bodies, leading them to believe the man they arrested is a mass murderer.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, motherfucker. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't fuck with me, Jeffrey. I'll kill you. God damn it. Look at me, motherfucker. I hate you.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to I don't know how to put it, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them?
Right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. I always knew that it was wrong, but after the first killing was not planned. No one had a clue as to what was happening for over a decade.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of True Grime. Today, we will be looking at Jeffrey Dahmer, perhaps the most notorious serial killer of all time. He took the lives of 17 innocent young men and sexually assaulted many more. There are varying modern opinions as far as Dahmer's actual diagnosis was, and I am not a licensed psychologist, but Dahmer was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder by a variety of different psychologists prior to his trial. Jeffrey had a childhood that was fairly normal by the standards of some, but undoubtedly grew up in a home that was by no means healthy. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father Lionel was an oddly emotionless chemist, who despite being absent emotionally and physically for much of Jeff's childhood, was certainly the family member Jeff remained closest to throughout his life. His mother, Joyce, was a hypochondriac with depression and remained highly unstable for most of Jeff's upbringing, even attempting suicide at one point. Some sources claim that Jeff was emotionally neglected as a young child, and others say he was doted on. Regardless, Jeff recalled fighting and tension in his home from his earliest memories, in his own words, unsure of the solidarity of his family. Shortly before his 4th birthday, Jeff required surgery for a double hernia in his groin. Lionel Dahmer claims that his son was never quite the same after this surgery, becoming extremely reserved and withdrawn. One of his elementary school teachers recalled feeling that he showed signs of abandonment, and these signs worsened when Joyce became pregnant with her 2nd child. In October of 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. Joyce soon after gave birth to Jeff's younger brother, who he named David. Around this time, Jeff began to show an interest in dead animals. When he was 4, Jeff witnessed his father removing animal remains from underneath their house. Jeff, looking longingly at the pile of bones, thrust his hands in. He was enamored by the sounds they made when clacking together, and he called them his fiddlesticks. From this point forward, Jeff was on the lookout for new playthings. In 1968, Jeff and his family moved to Bath, Ohio. Their new home stood on an acre and a half of land, the only buildings being the home and the small hut that was a short walk's distance away from the home. In this hut, Jeffrey began to collect large insects and the remains of small animals such as squirrels and gophers, sometimes storing them in jars of formaldehyde that he would procure from his father's equipment. A few years later, during a dinner with his family, Jeff asked his father what would happen if the chicken's bones were put into bleach. Lionel, excited at what he viewed as Jeffrey's scientific curiosity, instructed him on how to bleach and preserve the bones of animals. Jeffrey practiced this as often as he could, frequently collecting roadkill, dissecting it, preserving what he wanted to keep, and burying the rest of the remains near the hut. He told a friend once that he was curious how the animals fit together. Sometime in 1975, when Jeff was 15, he decapitated a dog carcass before nailing the body to a tree and impaling the head on a stick close by. Claiming that he had discovered the scene by chance, he pranked a friend by leading him to discover the scene.
Jeff, do you remember your earliest experience and earliest interest, fascination with the inside of animals? Where that came from?
In ninth grade, in biology class, we had the usual dissection of fetal pigs. I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it. And I just started branching out, dogs, cats. I suppose it could have turned into a normal hobby like taxidermy, but it didn't. It veered off into this. Why, I don't know. All I know is that I wanted to see what the insides of these animals looked like.
Was there some pleasure in the cutting open of the animal?
Yes, there was. No sexual pleasure, but just it's hard to describe.
Sense of power, sense of control?
I suppose that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
His mother's mental health deteriorated further during this time. Her antidepressants and sleeping pill dosage increased by her doctor, and she drifted further and further away from her family. From the time he began high school at the age of 14, Dahmer was viewed as an outcast. He was seen as somewhat of a celebrity among his peers, though not for the fact that anyone really liked him. He had become known for frequent strange outbursts and pulling pranks on others. His mother had a house decorator friend with cerebral palsy, and he would often impersonate him. These antics came to be known as doing a Dahmer. He had already been drinking heavily by this point, at one point being asked by another student why he was drinking scotch so early in the morning. He said that it was his medicine. Around this time, reaching puberty, Jeffrey came to the realization that he was gay. He claimed to have had a brief relationship with another local boy, but that never went very far. Dahmer admitted that during this time he began to fantasize about the complete dominance and submission of himself over another boy, this evolving into obsessive thoughts about hearts and torsos. These sexual fantasies became intertwined with his obsession with dissection and organs and how they all fit together.
One of your dad's biggest questions is when you began to slip away, when you crossed over into this world of obsession or dark fantasy from which you just couldn't return. Can you pinpoint that? Is there a sense for when that really began to happen with you, Jeff?
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't. I just kept it all inside.
Do you have any sense for where that was coming from?
No. No, I've talked with a few psychologists about it. They have their theories, but they don't have any concrete answers either.
Do you have a theory?
No, not really. I don't know where it came from. I probably will never know. But I never dreamed that it would become a reality.
These obsessive thoughts found their target in a local jogger that Jeffrey had taken to watching every day as he ran by, and he developed a fantasy of subduing this jogger and having his unconscious body to do with as he pleased. Eventually, one day Dahmer worked up the nerve to hide in the bushes and waiting, with a baseball bat. By a stroke of pure luck, the jogger never ran by that day. After discovering that Joyce had had an affair, her and Lionel agreed to divorce. Lionel moved into a hotel room a few miles down the road, and Joyce left soon after, taking David with her. Jeffrey, having turned just 18, was left all alone. He committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after graduating from high school.
From 15 on, I had this reoccurring fantasy of meeting a hitchhiker on the road, and of taking him hostage and doing what I wanted with him. About 3 years later, I was 18 years old, driving home. I saw this hitchhiker about a mile from my house. Thought to myself, should I stop and pick him up, or should I just keep on going? I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality.
What happened after you took him to the house?
The house was empty. My mother was up in Chippewa Falls with her family, and my dad was living in a rented motel about 5 miles away due to the divorce. And I pretty much had the place to myself. I was drinking a lot during that time, and just, I don't know, looking for something to, some way to find some fulfillment, some pleasure. And I acted on my fantasies, and that's where everything went wrong.
This was the summer of 1978 when you took your first victim.
Right. Once it happened the first time, it just seemed like it had control of my life from there on in.
On his way home, he saw a young hitchhiker on the side of the road. Jeff stopped to talk to the young man, named Stephen Hicks. Stephen was hitchhiking his way to a concert, and Jeff offered him to hang out with him at his house, drink a few beers, and then take him to his concert. According to Dahmer, they hung out, drank, and eventually had sex. At a certain point, Stephen began to express a desire to leave, which Dahmer did not want at all. Jeffrey beat Stephen's skull in with a 10-pound dumbbell, which killed him. Jeffrey removed all of Stephen's clothes, sensually placed his hands all over the body, and masturbated onto the corpse. He removed the flesh from Stephen's bones, dissolved it in acid, and flushed it down the toilet, crushed his bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered them in the woods behind his home. 6 weeks later, Lionel and his new fiancée came to reclaim the home, and found Jeff in the house in a state of disarray. That August, Dahmer enrolled in Ohio State University, planning to major in business. Despite Lionel having paid through to his second semester, Jeff dropped out after only 3 months due to his constant consumption of alcohol. He enlisted in the Army of January 1979 at the behest of Lionel, desperate to insert some structure into his son's life. He went through basic training and then medical training, eventually being deployed as a combat medic to Germany in July. His first year of service was reported to be average or slightly above average. Over time, of course, his alcoholism began to affect his work, and by 1971, Jeff had been given an honorable discharge and was sent back to the United States. Afraid to face his father, he went to Miami instead and attempted to live on his own. He failed in this endeavor, spending all of his money on drinks, and eventually was kicked out of the hotel that he was living in for lack of payment. By September, Jeff had called his father asking to return home. 2 weeks after his return, Jeff was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct and was fined $60 and given a suspended 10-day jail sentence. After unsuccessfully trying to wean him off of alcohol, Lionel sent Jeff to live with his grandmother in the hopes that she could get through to him. Jeff's grandmother was the only family member that Jeff truly showed any kind of affection to, and Lionel hoped her influence would be good for him. For a while, this arrangement worked wonderfully. Jeff showed initiative in finding work and helping with the household chores, though he continued to drink. In 1982, Jeff found work as a phlebotomist and held this job for 10 months before getting laid off. At some point during this time, Jeff stole a small container of blood to bring home and consume, his obsession with bodies and their contents still brewing in his mind. He was also arrested for indecent exposure at the Wisconsin State Fair, exposing himself to at least 25 people, including children. He was convicted and fined $50 plus court costs. After losing his phlebotomy job, Jeff remained unemployed for over 2 years, living on an allowance from his grandmother. In 1985, he finally found work as a mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, working 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 6 nights a week with Saturdays off. Shortly after starting this job, Jeff claims that while at the public library, a man tossed him a crumpled piece of paper. It was a note offering fellatio to Jeff in the bathroom. Jeff said that he did not act on this man's offer, but that the incident stirred the fantasies of power and control that he had begun to develop as a teenager. At this point, he began to frequent Milwaukee's gay bars and bathhouses. In his encounters with other men at the bathhouses, Jeff found himself incredibly frustrated and turned off by the fact that his partners would move while having sex. After his arrest, Dahmer would state that it was around this time that he trained himself to view people as objects of pleasure instead of people. Because of this, he started the regular practice of drugging his partners, spiking their drinks with sedatives so he could have their bodies and not their consciousness. After many of these instances, Jeff was caught and banned from the bathhouses. During this time, he also stole a mannequin from the department store that he used to attempt to satisfy his sexual urges until it was found by his grandmother and she made him get rid of it. Somewhere generally around this time, Jeff read an obituary for a local 18-year-old whose body he would attempt to dig up shortly after his burial. He found the soil to be too hard, and he gave up on this. He was arrested again on September 8, 1986, for lewd and lascivious behavior, committing the crime of masturbating in the presence of two 12-year-old boys. For some reason, this charge was dropped to disorderly conduct, and Jeff was sentenced to 1 year probation and court-mandated counseling. On November 20th, 1987, Jeff met a man named Stephen Tuomi and convinced Stephen to join him at the Ambassador Hotel. While Jeff said that he had no intention of anything except for drugging Stephen and exploring his body, Jeff blacked out from drinking and woke up in the morning to find Stephen's dead body draped over the side of the bed, his chest nearly black with bruising, and his rib cage and sternum crushed in. Jeff's hands and forearms were covered in bruising as well. Jeff maintained that he had no memory of this event, but that he must have killed him. He went out and bought a large suitcase and brought it back to transport the body back to his grandmother's house. There he dismembered the body and crushed his bones in the basement, putting them in trash bags and leaving it for the trash man to come by and pick it up. Somehow, Jeff got away with this.
The second occurrence was 1984, roughly. And I met this guy at one of the bars, downtown Milwaukee bars. We went back to the hotel, just planning on getting drunk. I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious, and was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised and his chest was bruised and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing.
Did you ever tell yourself, I have to stop this? I must stop doing this?
Yes.
When it was going on?
After the second time, it seemed like the compulsion to do it was too strong, and I didn't even try to stop it after that. But before the second time, things had been building up gradually, going to bookstores, going to the bars, the gay bars, bath clubs. When that wasn't enough, buying sleeping pills and using it on various guys in the bath clubs. It just escalated slowly but surely. And after the second time, which was not planned, it was out of control. Felt like it was out of control.
Hey everyone. Though I wasn't planning on it, it turns out Jeffrey Dahmer will be a 2-part series, considering we've only covered 2 of 17 murders. I hope you guys enjoyed part 1. Be sure to keep an eye out for part 2 in the very near future. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe. Also consider joining our Patreon, where for $5 a month, you will gain access to Patreon-exclusive polls, transcripts, full downloads of the original music I produced for the show, and the occasional bonus episode. Thank you again for watching. After I'm finished with Dahmer, I have more exciting things planned for the channel, including a multi-part series on the West Memphis 3, as well as a special Halloween episode. I hope to see you all again soon. And remember, monsters from the grimiest places often have the prettiest faces.